Hello everyone, this is Miss Smith. I hope you all have been doing well. We're now at the point in the semester when we're going to talk about how to get a job, essentially our jobs packet. Okay, this is a very important conversation, and in your voicemail message assignment, many of you said that you were looking forward to learning about how to write a resume. So we'll cover all of that. Now this video will talk about a variety of different things that I want to highlight from the readings, with the exception of the resume and the cover letter. The resume and the cover letter will be covered in a different video, okay? And for this video, we're doing something a little bit different. So I'm not using my usual PowerPoints. Instead, I'm using an e-book version of our textbook so that I could point out different things as well, okay? And so I will have to kind of jump back and forth in this video to kind of go back to this table of contents page that you're seeing here so that I can get, to other places in the chapter. So just bear with me as we navigate through a little bit, okay? And so this chapter contains a wealth of information about how to get a job. Okay, and it contains a lot of multifaceted information. So you get information from the perspective of the employer, from the perspective of the job seeker. You get information about social media and everything from how to find the job to how to professionally decline a job offer or how to accept a job offer and how to thank the employer or prospective employer for the opportunity to interview. Okay, so it covers a whole lot of information, and hopefully in reading through this chapter you found that you have gleaned a whole lot from it that will be helpful to you. So again, this video is going to highlight some things that I just want to kind of emphasize a little bit more in this video lecture. Okay, and so I like that the book starts with the steps the employer takes when hiring. I think that's a good place to start. Okay, because a lot of times when we see a job posted, we don't understand the process that happens to get it to that point. Okay, and so when a job is posted, when an opening becomes available, a lot of times what will happen is the employer will try to determine if they need to make any changes to the actual job duties. And so what was a part of the job duties that the former employer in that position had, they may need to change that. They may need to add some more responsibilities to it, or they may want to take some things away. And so the first thing that usually happens is the employer tries to determine if the job duties are still suitable. Is it still what they're looking for? Do they need to add more responsibilities to it? Do they need to take some away? And then when they figure that out and write a job description, then they advertise it on the company's website or various online sites and newspapers and professional publications as well. They begin receiving applications, and they review resumes and cover letters, and it just depends on the company. So a lot of times companies will ask you to fill out an application before you even send in a resume or a cover letter. But sometimes it's the reverse of that. So sometimes employers will ask you for your resume and your cover letter, and then if they think that you are a worthy candidate, they will invite you to apply for the position and give you an application form. And they may request further proof of your skill by way of letter of recommendation or academic transcripts. And so at that point, if they want to interview you, they would interview you, and they would do follow-up interviews as they need to, and then eventually they will offer the job to the best qualified person. And so if we can take a step back for a moment, I want us to kind of think in terms of our professional communication brain, right? Remember, we've already talked about audience, and we've talked about the needs of our audience. And so you have to remember that your jobs packet materials is a professional document, right? These are professional documents. They are technical documents, meaning that you want to make sure that your writing is concise, that your writing is very much geared toward the reader, that you're writing for the reader and not for yourself. Keep in mind what your audience needs, okay? So if we think about some of the things we've talked about before with audience needs, our audience will be often interrupted, Remember that? Our audience will be impatient to find important information, and the documents that your target audience read will often be seen by others. And so you want to keep that in mind when you're preparing these materials that will go to your audience, right? Especially in the case of a job search, because you want to make your best impression, obviously, right? You want to make your very best impression. So keeping what your audience needs in mind will be really, really, really important. And just kind of understanding that process that the employer goes through is insightful as well. Okay. And so the book then talks about steps to follow to get hired, right? It's good to look over these as well. And so you, of course, want to analyze your strengths and make sure you are applying for jobs that you are qualified for. Okay, jobs where your strengths can shine, jobs where you know you've been trained for it or you have experience in it and you would be a good candidate for it. Okay, you want to enhance your image. And so the book talks about enhancing your professional image and making sure you are mindful of your digital footprint. And both of those things are very, very important. And so in terms of enhancing your professional image, you want to remember that you're always expected to be professional in the workplace, definitely. But everywhere you go, right? You're always expected to carry yourself in such a manner that you are behaving in a manner that's respectable, that you're behaving in a manner that is, I don't want to say praiseworthy, but something that is decent behavior. Because all it takes is one time for you to do something that's out of character or indecent, and that can stick with you, especially in the job search, okay? That one time when that person in traffic causes you to lose your temper and you flip them the bird, that could be the person who's going to be interviewing you, right? You never know. You never know. And so we're not perfect people, but you want to make sure that you're professional in your dealings. You want to make sure that you are being mindful of your reputation, of your credibility, of how your behaviors affect others, okay? And so you want to enhance your image. The book talks a little bit more specifically about things like networking, which is very important. Making sure that you're letting people know what you're interested in, right? That you're talking to people, that you're doing a good job where you currently are, that you're building good rapport with people, good reputation, good credibility. All of those things help you enhance your image. In terms of your digital footprint, you want to make sure that whatever you have on any social media site will reflect well on you, okay? That it will not diminish your credibility. And a lot of these things are common sense things, but sometimes we view our lives in compartmental manners, right? We think, okay, this is me as an employee, and this is me as a friend, and this is me as a so-and-so, right? And so we kind of compartmentalize our lives, but it doesn't actually work that way, right? And so when an employer is considering a job candidate, nowadays, whether you think it's fair or not, that employer will more than likely check that job candidate's social media pages. It's common practice. And a lot of times, students may not agree with that, but there's really nothing we can do about it, right? Because employers will tend to do that. And so you want to be very, very mindful of what you have on your social media pages. If you have a lot of inflammatory things, if you have strong opinions about things, and you have every right to have strong opinions about things, and especially controversial topics or highly sensitive political topics or whatever the case might be, you may want to make sure that your faces are your sorry, not your faces, your pages are private, and you may want to make sure that you take down some things that may not reflect well on you. Okay, if you have pictures of you in at a party and you appear to be drunk, or something is not decent looking, you want to remove those things, especially as you are going on the job market, because those things reflect on who you are as a person. And so the employer only has what you tell them. The employer will only know about you what you tell him or her about you, okay? And so if you tell them something that seems to diminish your credibility, they may not give you the opportunity to interview for the job. Okay, so keep those things in mind. They want to hire someone who will be a team player, who will be a good coworker, who will be responsible, who will be able to get along with others. All of those things they want. And if anything in your digital footprint speaks against that, then it can hinder you. Okay? All right, look in all the right places for a job, right? That makes sense. And so the book gives you some great information about where you can look to start your job search. And that's going to be really important for one of our assignments in these next few weeks. The book talks about assembling a dossier or a portfolio. We're going to do an online portfolio later in the semester, but there's good information in that section as well. Again, we're not going to talk about the resume portion in this video, or the cover letter aspect in this video, but again, the book gives great information about that, and we'll touch on that in another video. Going on an interview is, of course, important. Really, really important, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. And then accepting or declining a job offer is also very important, that you do it in the right manner. Okay, and so the book offers a whole lot of information, even information about transitioning into the civilian workforce if you have been military personnel and if you've been serving our country. And so understanding how to do that. So it's great information that we have. Okay. And so let's see if I can get my computer to behave for me. Just a second. Sorry. Here we go. All right. And so where were we? And so we were talking then about the steps you need to follow to get hired. Okay. And so the book talks in more detail about some of the things that I've already covered just in that overview there. But I think it's important that we talk a little bit more about the interview. Okay. Going on an interview is really important, right? And it's really important that you make a good impression. And so here are some of the things that I've learned, and these may be things you've learned already in your own experiences in the job market, and maybe you've never had a job, and maybe you are wondering what all of this entails, right? So maybe you can add your own insight to what I'm about to say, or maybe you would agree with what I'm about to say. And anyway, this information is useful. So when you go on a job interview, it is important that you understand that you are always, always, always being interviewed. Okay? You're always being interviewed. From the moment you drive into the parking lot, you're being interviewed. Somebody could see you. You could be making an impression even at that point in time. If you're running late for your job interview and you fly into that parking lot and you almost run down somebody and zoom into a parking space, listen, your job interview has already started. Somebody saw that. Somebody noticed that, right? And so you want to make sure that you are mindful that you are always, always, always being interviewed. I like to tell people, make sure you are pleasant to everyone on that job site, right? There is no such thing as an unimportant person, not just in the interview portion, right? But just in general, okay? Just in general. I remember someone told us once before, and it was a really good comment, that big doors swing on small hinges. And so the people that we sometimes think are unimportant people, right? Maybe they're just cleaning the bathrooms, or maybe they're just, painting or fixing something, or maybe they're just an administrative assistant. Those are the people sometimes that have the most influence, and they can make the difference in you getting that job opportunity that you want. They could just become good colleagues of yours, good friends of yours, good people for you to know. And so there's no such thing as small people. Everybody is important. When you go on a job interview, make sure that you speak to the receptionist. Right? Make sure that you're pleasant with that person. You are always being interviewed. They're looking at how you approach them. They're looking at how you communicate with them. Okay? You're not just waiting to get in front of the boss or the hiring manager. Every single person that you meet on your way will be an important person for you. Okay, it's important, very important. That you're prepared for your interview. You want to make sure you do your homework about the company. That is so very important. If someone asks you at the end of an interview, which they always do, by the way, do you have any questions for us? You need to have prepared at least 2 to 3 questions that you have about that company. And your questions need to be informed. So your questions need to be based on research you've already done about the company. Okay, everybody with me? Okay, it needs to be based on information you've researched already. And so you can find this information on their website. Go on their website, look up their mission statement, right? Look up the history of the company. Find out who they are as a company, what their culture is like. And make sure that you have prepared some questions for them. Okay? They want to see that you're interested in being an employee at that company. An employer wants to know that you, the job seeker, wants to be employed right there. Okay? They're not so much as not as interested in you it's just saying, well, I'm looking in various places for jobs and I'm just trying to land my first job in this field. They want to know that you want to be employed right there. And so make sure that you know information about that company. Now, during the course of the interview, if they answer those 2 to 3 questions that you've written down, then you should say, well, you know what? I wanted to ask a question about so and so, but you've already answered that for me. Okay, and so at least they'll know that you did have a question in mind. Okay, so do your homework about the company so that you know exactly what it is that you want to ask them so that you look very much engaged, okay, with that company. Okay, and so the book talks about questions that you can expect at your interview. So it can be really, really, really hard to answer some of these questions, right? But you need to be prepared for that. And the book gives us some great information, some great questions that we can use to help us prepare for the job interview. I would strongly encourage that you use these questions to help you prepare. Okay? And so, what do you say about salary, right? Um, this can be challenging. And so if an employer asks you, or at that point a hiring manager or prospective employer asks you the salary that you expect, you don't want to say a number that's so high that it would knock you out of the running for the position. And you don't want to lowball yourself or say a number that's so low that you're undercutting what you should be earning for that position. Okay, so if you're asked what salary you expect for the job, the book advises us not to give an exact figure. Okay, you may undercut yourself if the employer has a higher figure in mind, but by doing your homework on salary ranges, you will have a better feel for the market when the employer does mention salary. Okay, so operating in that range will be important. Now, in our career analysis assignment, we'll talk more about that, and you'll see some resources online that will help you figure out the range for the field that you're interested in, even down to the local level. And so that will give you great information to help you be able to determine the type of salary you feel you would deserve for the position you're going after. Okay? Okay. And the book also gives us questions that you may ask the interviewer. Again, like I was saying before, you want to have questions about the company, okay? But these questions also may be useful to you to give you the information that you need during that interview, okay? The book also talks about what the employer can't ask you or what the interviewer cannot ask you. So you want to make sure that you read that very carefully because some things are just against the law. And you don't want to be in a position where you're, having to answer something that you shouldn't have to answer. Okay? And so 10 interview do's and don'ts. So let's just go over these. and as we begin to wrap up our conversation on interviews, okay? Um, Number one, you want to be on time. That's a given. I would suggest if you are going to a job site that you've not been to before, you don't know where the company is located exactly, you kind of have to find your way there. I would strongly suggest that you go a day or two ahead of time to drive the route. Okay, so that you know the amount of time it will take you to get there, and so you know the best route to take to get there. Make sure that you're on time. It's always good to show up about 15 minutes early. Okay, and so you definitely do not want to be right at the time or late. You want to make sure that you're on time, and in this case, on time is early. You want to make sure you turn off your cell phone and any other media device. So hopefully this goes without saying, but when you are there for an interview, that prospective employer should have your full attention. You shouldn't be checking your cell phone. Your cell phone shouldn't be going off. You shouldn't be checking your any other device, your watch, your iPad, whatever. You shouldn't be checking anything. You should give them your full, undivided attention. Even as you're sitting in the waiting room, do not be on your device. Sit there quietly, patiently, waiting for your interview. Okay? Don't distract yourself with anything. Be focused. Okay? Dress appropriately for the occasion and be well groomed. Absolutely. And you want to avoid things, and I'm glad the book mentions this. Avoid things like strong perfume or cologne. Okay? If they can smell you before they see you, that's usually a sign that it's too strong of a scent, right? And not just bad scents, of course, but we're talking about the good scents, the colognes and the perfumes that are just too strong. You want to avoid that. And the book gives some suggestions for what to wear to a job interview. Be careful of tattoos. Now, it depends on the job you're going for. Some companies don't care. It's not that big of a deal. But depending on the job that you're going for, you may want to wear long sleeves if you have a lot of tattoos, because sometimes they can be a turnoff for the prospective employer. Whether you agree with that or not, then sometimes that's just the case. You want to make sure that you greet the interviewer with a friendly and firm but not vice-like handshake. Okay, and so a firm handshake still has its place in workplace communication. It's a form of communication, right? And so you want to make sure you have a good, strong handshake. Don't sit down before the interviewer does. Wait for the interviewer to invite you to sit and indicate where to sit. Okay? A lot of times during an interview, you may be ushered to a boardroom and you may be given the top seat, right? The seat at the head of the table. And there may be other people in the room with you, like several other people. And so you want to make sure that you're not the first one to sit down. Make sure that they tell you where they want you to be. And kind of going back to that point about other people in the room, I've done job interviews before where I've communicated with one person on the phone to set up the job interview. Then when I show up, it's not just me and that one individual. It's me and about seven other people, right? And so you want to make sure that you're mentally prepared, that during your interview, you may not just be meeting with one person, you may be meeting with the whole department, okay? And just do your best. Just make sure that you're prepared. You know yourself. You know your training. You know that you're qualified. Just take confidence in that and give your best professional communication effort. Speak slowly and distinctly. If you talk fast, typically, you want to make sure that you're not speaking too quickly or in too much of a rapid fire motion, because that could tend to confuse the listener, and it makes you seem very nervous. You don't want to talk too slowly either, okay? And avoid one word or two word answers that sound unfriendly or unprepared. Don't use slang or overly casual language. And don't monopolize the discussion by talking too much about yourself. Don't act arrogant. And you want to definitely show interest in the position. Okay? It goes without saying also that you should not chew gum. click a pen, fidget, twirl your hair, tap your foot, make any kind of noises or gestures that can be distracting or annoying. Okay, you want to make sure that you maintain eye contact with the interviewer, and so you do not want to look away like you're avoiding something. You want to hold your gaze. And you want to look to different people in the room if the room has more than one person in it. All right, you don't want to focus so much of your attention on one person. You want to engage everybody in that room. Okay? When the interview is over, thank the interviewer for considering you for the job and say you look forward to hearing from him or her. That's really important. Okay? You want to make sure that you're presenting yourself in a really good manner and that you end on that goodwill type of closing, okay, in a goodwill manner. You want to make sure that you do that. All right, and so we're just highlighting different things, and talking about the interview portion is really important. Okay, so there of course are good, right and wrong ways to accept or decline a job offer. But before we get to that, it's always a good idea that you follow up with some form of a letter or a thank you card. And so I tend to do thank you cards. If I've had an interview, I want to make sure that I handwrite a thank you card and I mail it to the interviewer. At the end of the interview, you can ask for the interviewer's business card and business cards of everyone who was a part of that interview. Okay, that way you'll make sure that you have the correct spelling of their first and last name, and their email address, and hopefully the company's address, right, where you can mail the letter to. It's always a nice touch when you can handwrite a thank you card. And you can just go to a store like a Walmart or a Target and buy a box of thank you cards if you know you're going to be out and doing interviews, so that you can just write it out, and make sure your penmanship is legible, right, that they can read what you're saying. But you just want to say a simple thank you for the opportunity to interview for the position. I am very excited about this opportunity and I look forward to hearing from you soon. Something really simple like that. And of course you want to include a complimentary close and your signed name. Okay, and so you want to make sure that you do that. The book talks about a follow-up letter. Okay, and so follow-up letter does the same thing, but maybe in a little bit more detail, where you can touch on a little bit more of what happened during the interview. And of course, you again want to make sure that you're ending on a goodwill closing, um, and that you have a professional letter. Okay, and so that's really important. So let's say you've been offered a job and you want to decline the job. It's not a job that you think you will actually accept. That does happen. The book does give us good information about how to do that, right? How to accept or decline a job offer. Okay? And so again, there is a lot of good information in this chapter about everything from how to search for a job to how to decline a job offer, everything in between. And hopefully this lecture has been helpful as you continue to read through this chapter and find information that is going to be beneficial for you as a job seeker. Okay, if you have questions, please let me know. I'm happy to help. And again, I've said this in emails before, but I'll say it again now. It's always nice to meet my online students. And so if you have a class on campus, please feel free to stop by my office, B119, just to say hello and introduce yourselves. Hope you have a great day.